Seventh, yeah. Good evening, everyone. This is
Recording in progress.
regularly scheduled meeting of the Zoning and Planning Committee. I'm Lyle Baker, the chair of the committee from Ward 7. We've been joined in the room by the vice chair, Councilor Oliver, by Councilor Albright, Ward 2, Councilor Getz from Ward 5, and remotely by Councilor Krinsman. And also we welcome Councilor Kelly, who's not a member of the committee. Always glad to see her. And we have representatives from the planning department who will introduce at the time they make their presentation, but also we've been joined by Mr. McCormick, who is conducting his own meeting in another room. So I'm not quite sure how he manages that, but I'm full of admiration for him. Anyway, so we've got a fairly full agenda tonight, and but the nice part of it is we have a chance to talk with Ruth Goldman at the outset about joining the Community Preservation Committee. And the item is number 23625. Who's providing the mayor appointing Ruth Goldman at 117 Cypress Street. Number 2, Newton as a member of the Community Preservation Committee for a term of office set to expire September 15th, 2028. So, Ms. Goldman, we have known you for a while in your other capacity, but we're delighted to see you in this one. So, would you like to say a little bit about your interest in this role, and then members of the committee can ask you questions, and then we'll go from there.
Well, I actually been adjacently involved in community preservation since we first passed the legislation in Massachusetts, because my day job is working in philanthropy and funding parks and open space projects. And then more in Boston and now across Massachusetts, and with a focus on gateway cities. And so back in the early 2000s, when CPA was put together a campaign that was actually run out of Trust for Public Land, we actually some of the family I worked for was pretty involved, and then we supported some of the advocacy to get it across the legislature. So and then Newton was one of the earliest ones to adopt it. So you all know me as a former school committee member, but my day job has always been around parks and open space and recreation. Spent a lot of time in them in Newton. My kids played a lot of sports and spent a lot of time in the parks here, and I spent a lot of my spare time in state and national parks. So big, probably more and then we are more focused on affordable housing in my work. That's something I'm pretty passionate about, and been a pretty big advocate for it. We live in an ADU, built a historic one, and I would say that the historic preservation side of the CPA is not my forte, but I'm assuming there are other people that know more than I do. So that's kind of my interest background on it. I'm happy to answer questions or.
Thank you. Appreciate that. Questions? Councilor Cameron.
I have no questions. I know you well and have always admired all of the work that you've done. Thank you very much for always stepping up to the plate and doing what needs to be done in the city. And when the time comes after everyone else has had their questions or comments, I am happy to move approval, since you live in Ward 6.
Right, yes.
That's our Councilor Over.
I'll just say, I mean, I have no questions for you either, except I want to hear about the ADU. But that will come later. And thanks so much for being willing to step up and do this.
Yeah, I've also been on the Urban Tree Commission for a couple of years with that team, so Mark.
Oh, that's just great. Councilor Oliver.
Great. Thank you for being willing to serve. I think it's fair to say we want and need all the help we can get, right? Have you been kind of following along with the work that's been going through, or the projects perhaps that have been going through CPC recently?
I went back and looked at all the minutes. I'm pretty familiar with, I mean, I wasn't following along particularly, because I'll be honest, I took a pretty good break at the school committee from anything except, I mean, I always keep up on things, Vicki knows, I send her emails once in a while about things. but I am really aware, I know all the projects. Not, again, not every one of them, but I certainly know the parks and open space ones, and I know that affordable housing trust work, but hey, David. I certainly Webster Woods was a project I followed, and I'm a big user of Newton Community Farm. So I know that project is kind of partway through the process right now. And then I know there's some work going on in the Jackson Homestead. And those, I mean, those are kind of the ones that stood out to me.
And just out of curiosity, like, if you kind of, if it's fair to say, kind of, you're familiar with the general direction or the general kind of, you know, how CPC's been kind of, I don't know, the direction that they're going,
Yeah,
right? Are there any thoughts that you have as to, you know, some of the places you might want to bolster or maybe shift gears a little bit, or is that just not a fair question?
I
Cause
mean,
it might be
you know, I
too
guess,
soon.
you know, my feeling is that. And it was sort of my approach on school committee is I kind of feel like, at least for the first year, you ought to kind of get to know people and sort of find out why things have been going the way that they have and, you know, get involved, do some work, listen to folks. I've already had a couple of people reach out to me when they saw that my name was on it before I have like great ideas for how to do it better or different. I mean, I feel like that overall, I think there's, you know, not enough money for all the projects that need to be done, like, for example. It would be great to see the Crystal Lake bathhouse get fixed up at some point, that's, I mean, the new. Improvements around Crystal Lake, I live and I spend a lot of time there and it's. I mean, it's gotta be one of the most heavily used. Places in the city, I would say, and it is packed. I don't think it's all Newton residents all the time, but it certainly is a destination, and I certainly think it would be great to provide some, you know, that new park is amazing, and it has prevented a lot of the degradation that just happens there when there's so many people using it. I would love to see, you know, some more facilities there, but I don't know, I mean, it's great that the gas pool got done, and I think there was a bit of money in that, but I think there's just. And I think a lot has been done, you know, again, speaking more to our parks and open space, I mean, that affordable housing is so much more expensive than the other two parts of the other things that can, you know, make up what CPA money can be used for, that it could certainly absorb twice as much money as CPA produces, the surcharge produces every year, because it's just an outsized expense, you know, for a few $1,000s. Or, you know, $100,000, you can do a lot in parks and open space, you can do some in affordable housing, I mean, in, you know, historic preservation. A lot less in affordable housing, so, you know, I think I would hate to see the balance go way more towards affordable housing and at the expense of other things, but. Because it's taken a fair bit of it, but I think the balance seems pretty. Pretty reasonable based on like how much things cost, like what you get for your dollar, I think that has to be accounted for when you look at. That kind of money, so.
Okay.
That's
Well, thank you, yeah, no, I understood and appreciate that, that's all I got, Chair.
Thank you very much. I just want to note, we've been joined by Councilor Kalis from Ward 8, the Vice President, and also we've been joined online by Councilor Wright. And I noticed that the city solicitor, Associate City Solicitor, Mr. Lee is here. Any other members of the?
Did you get Pam right?
Yeah.
Yes.
You did?
Yes.
Okay.
I got Councilor Kelly.
Councilor Kelly.
Yeah, and Principal. Okay, I heard a colleague wish to move the, all right.
I would love to move approval.
The motion is made to approve. All those in favor will say aye.
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 Opposed, abstained? Okay, the ayes have it, and Gilman, you know, the drill that we got in the council at the next meeting, and barring the tsunami, then we will be improved and then we will go on from there.
thank you all very much for your time. Good luck
Thank
with the
you.
rest of the meeting. Thank you for the beverage.
And I don't know if Councilor Baker just mentioned this, but you're more than welcome to stay for the night's festivities.
That's okay.
All right.
But have fun.
And, you know, you can always tune in to these people, the vice president. All right, thank you all. I just want to mention now that we've joined with a number of people just to give you a preview of some coming attractions. You know that we will have set some public hearings, but I've asked you to set aside the Monday, the 29th. And that's going to be an opportunity to continue our discussion about the office. How supply and opportunities in the city. And through the planning director, we've tended an invitation to the Chamber of Commerce to come and participate, as well as the planning and development, the Economic Development Commission. And we'll have a chance to have some further conversation on that. So
That's 29.
29th, that's a Monday, that's the 5th Monday. So I just want to make sure you've all got it on your calendar. It's not a regular night. You meet the Thursday before that same meeting because of the way the holidays work. So it's kind of and that meeting, the vice chair will take over because I have to be out of town for a few, but I'll try and be just a minute.
Can I just ask, are you having a meeting on September 25th? That's the Thursday before?
Yes,
Oh, do you? Okay.
Yeah.
It is.
I had something else planned for that.
that's the public hearing then. It's been on the calendar for a while, so.
Okay, I'll be there.
Well, the alternative was to schedule an all weekend session.
Okay.
So, you know, we kind of, you know,
I'm good.
yeah, you're in for that? Great, okay. Council is be here that weekend.
All right.
Okay.
Okay,
That's a weekend.
so the next item is this is item 2825, request for addition of maximum residential facade build out ratio in chapter 30. And then the companion items are, and we've carried them along all along, which is the amendment for preservation of existing homes and amend the setbacks in MR zones. Those are items 8524 and 4124. Those I'm expecting just to hold, but they go sort of hand in hand with this. And here, you may remember, members of the committee, we had asked the department to go back and take the conversation that we had at the last time we discussed this, which was generally, if I recall, supportive of the concept, but also concerned that they wanted to try and figure out how to take care of people with existing structures who wanted to make additions, but not necessarily incentivize the tear downs and the replacement structures, which had been the problems that had been brought to us before we took this item up. So the department, having had several weeks over the summer to cook on this, is now prepared to give us their response. So who's going to present this? Mr. Mel? All right.
But
Okay.
I'll start us off.
All right.
Okay, so diving back into this item, I think it was last presented June, I want to say.
I think that's right.
And look, like the chair said, we went back, looked through those conversations, building off of what the committee agreed upon, didn't agree upon, wanted some more input on, and hopefully we believe came up with a compromise proposal. Again, and I think the chair, you did a good job of framing this, is, you know, what we're trying to do here is to get at a better quality design, whether it's a renovation of an existing structure or new construction, and really fits well within the neighborhood. Why we are looking at new tool such as the residential facade ratio is because of the trends and things that we're seeing, right? There is this trend of building to push a building up as far as possible, to build it as wide as possible at the front so that people can have open living space that's oriented to a large rear yard. We looked at setbacks, increasing setbacks, and that was one of the other docket items that's attached to this. And really what we saw was, again, if we're trying to incentivize quality design, that alone would not do it. It doesn't account for varying site conditions, and it would really disproportionately impact those narrow lots.
let me just pause you for a second. Can you make the slides bigger on the screen? I hate to lose the other people, but I think it may be easier for the committee, at least I would be able to read it easier. Thank you. Okay,
Okay. Just here's an example of a two-family development in the New Highlands.
Center Street?
This
Yes.
is on Center Street. And so again, how we got here, we worked with our consultants. We looked at a whole series of tear downs. We looked at recent changes to zoning regulation and regulation more generally. And we came to, through all of this, came to a kind of limited but specific tool that is the residential facade ratio. And where we are today versus where we were a few months ago in the proposal was taking in the input from the hearing, taking in the input from the committee, right? And the thing we heard in the previous meetings was there were too many exemptions or too generous exemptions that would lead to the exploitation or making this rule not effective. And so what we did there, and you might have seen in the draft language that was proposed, is the narrow lot exemption was decreased from 60 feet to 50 feet. So less lots would be able to use that exemption. When you are determining what counts versus what does not count within the facade ratio, we had proposed, similar to the garage ordinance, that portions of the building set back 10 feet would not count to promote, again, the breaking of the mass, differentiating the building through offsetting of building mass. That was deemed, in this case, not appropriate or not sufficient to create the right look and feel. So that was increased from 10 feet to 20 feet. On the other hand, there were committee members who felt that there were too few exemptions, and that it would be just much easier to create a new home and therefore pushing more homes into a tear down scenario. And so what we did there to counterbalance this was to say, not just a 1.5 story or less home, so not just a full cape or a full ranch would be exempt, but any portions of a building that are 1.5 stories or less would be exempt from the calculation. And again, this is another way both for new and existing buildings to kind of differentiate, break up the mass and make the building feel smaller. And again, it's not just about size, right? Because I think we looked at examples early on where either the home that was replacing the home that was there previously was either the same size or maybe slightly bigger, but it could feel smaller based on how you design the building. Not just about the overall square footage, it's how it's placed and how it's designed on a building as well. And then the last concern was around the issue of creating new nonconformities. I know councilors mentioned that there's numerous homes in numerous places that there are buildings that the facade is well beyond the 60% that's being proposed here. And so I think two things. One, the 1.5 story portion exemption will help out there, because I'm going to show some examples again of buildings that exist throughout the city that have these wings, these 1 story, 1.5 story wings. And then finally, there's a proposed de minimis allowance for by right alterations to existing buildings. So if you are existing building that has a facade greater than 60%, you are able by right to increase that up to a certain amount. Again, how we got here, we did a lot of research, we did a lot of analysis. Apologies for this blurred image, but I know we've seen it before. This is just news articles about the multiple zoning and regulatory changes that have happened over the last couple of years. But we did all of these things, right? We looked at what typically leads to a tear down and a demolition. We looked at how important new development is as a revenue source for the city of Newton, for a way to maintain the level of services that it provides year over year. We also know that the various regulatory changes that are very plurally pictured here, enacted over the last 2+ years, are having an impact on new building permits. And really, I think all of these things are complex in their own right, let alone when you're putting them all together. And we haven't seen how these are all working together to lead to better development, better design. So just to say, you should be cautious in thinking about how we move forward and make any, more significant changes. When it comes to tear downs, which again is the other companion docket item, this is something we talked about right now, is that stopping a tear down from happening of the tear downs that occur per year, which has been steadily around 100, it would really almost lead to a total moratorium or such a drastic reduction in what you can build to make it actually function. And again, we talked about the importance of city or the city's property and the value and the development of that property in operating budget for the city. We then moved and said, again, I know we've been talking about this, is that it's not about the tear down, it's about ensuring a quality product, whether it's a new construction or renovation. And that's where we landed here with this proposal in front of you now. And like we said, there's time that's needed to evaluate all these various other zoning and regulatory changes. So the actual recommendation, just step by step, this facade ratio, it needs to be defined. This would be a new section in, this would be new language in section 1. The highlighted section here is the change that I was talking about before, in that portions of the building needs to be pushed further back 20 feet instead of 10 feet for it not to count. So that you end up with greater differentiation. Here's kind of an example of what that could look like. The actual total amount that the building facade can be relative to the width of the lot is 60%. Again, working with UTIO, we came to this conclusion looking at kind of various lot sizes, typical lot sizes, looking at building forms, things that felt right, where again, at the end of the day, if you have a 60% allowance, your actual total setbacks are almost always going to be significantly more than what's required as your base requirement, right? SR2, 3, MR1, MR2, those are 15-foot. In total, but in these scenarios, when you cap the overall building facade at 60%, you're getting, 30 to 40 feet. We talked about those exemptions, again, going from instead of a 60-foot wide lot to a 50-foot wide lot, so less lots are exempt here, where then the setbacks come into play. And then finally, the other exemption, which is a little bit more permissive, is that any portion of a building that's 1.5 stories or less is exempt from that 60%. And just here, kind of visually what that would look like. This lot here on this site is 44 feet wide. So the setbacks would regulate, not the 60%. And then finally, I think we all know that there's numerous examples of these buildings around the city that have what I'll call various wings that are a single story. They're a garage, they're a sunroom, they've been finished, they've been, all these different things that exist that minimally, I think, impact the kind of, they don't contribute to the overall mass. And so we're saying, hey, let's recognize this and let's let people either build new or renovate in a way that aligns here. Another piece was, if there needs to be some relief that wasn't included previously, so a special permit allowance to increase is in this draft. And like some examples that we've shown previously, saying, hey, these weren't maybe the best examples of buildings that kind of built out well beyond that facade to what felt right. These could go forward. However, they'd have to come to the city council for a special permit. And then finally, that de minimis relief if you are renovating an existing home where you have a facade that's over that 60% maximum, you can increase that up to 10%. Without requiring a special permit, and so we understand that we want to create an incentive and an easier pathway for existing homes to renovate. This is one that should help let those homes go beyond. Obviously, they can also potentially build in the back of the house, but we don't know. And there's obviously numerous site conditions, so if they need to go to the side or it makes more sense, they have some relief, not infinite relief, but they have some that would be by right. And so this is my last slide. The public hearing was held in April, so that has lapsed. And so if this compromise proposal sounds right, and if you're looking to move forward with it, a new public hearing would be required to move forward.
And thank you very much. And I just note that, working with the department, we tried to figure out a calendar opportunity that would make this public hearing soon enough so that we could take action during this term, because I'd very much like to see if we can agree on this, and if we can, that we move it forward in this term rather than have it lapse because the end of the year. And that would be October 14th. So at some point, and depending on how the discussion goes, entertain the motion to set the public hearing for that date. That doesn't mean we pass it that day, but I do want to have enough opportunity to talk about it further. But I just want to say, I appreciate the department's really going back and listening to the conversations and the concerns that were expressed over time to try and shape something that will improve the situation. That may not solve all problems, but I think we've tried to make small steps forward. I think Councilor Kalis has made this point from time to time. That will improve the quality of construction in the city without burdening people unduly. And I think that this is, again, an effort in that direction. Now, whether you want to adjust any of the recommendations, that's obviously to the committee's choice. But it seems to me we've made some progress here. So at some point, I'd like to get a sense of the committee about how to proceed, but that's where we are. Those who'd like to be heard, Councilor Kalis, Councilor Danberg, Councilor Albright, and then Councilor Wright, and Councilor Getz, and then Councilor Wright.
Thank you, Chair. I have two questions. Good presentation, by the way. So is it that there are fewer exemptions in one area, one bucket, and then more exemptions in the other bucket? And therefore, what is it? Is it more exemptions or fewer exemptions overall?
I think the exemptions are minimized in some ways, right? The exemptions for a specific lot is reduced, right? Because you allowed a lot that was less 60 feet or less was included, now it's 50 feet or less. So there's a lot less existing properties that would be able to take that exemption and just say, hey, we don't need to meet this. Then the next piece is to say there was an exemption for 1.5 story buildings, if they were fully 1.5 stories. But it was saying, you know what, if it's really about breaking up mass, if it's really about making the building feel smaller, and we say that 1.5 stories portions or less do that, we should apply that to a building that utilizes 1.5 story, 1.5 story portions, not just that the entire building needs to be 1.5 stories. And again, those are kind of historic, I would say, or those are examples that exist throughout the city. You can just walk down Homer Street right here and find those buildings where it's a 2.5 story building with a wing or 2 wings. And if those are the portions that are protruding into the side setback, right? Those are going to be much less impactful on the neighbors and the overall size. I think what I know the committee has brought up time and time again is when you have a single story building that's replaced by a 2.5 story building where they're building up the grade with a retaining wall in some ways. And that 2.5 story building is at the setback line. I think it would be very different if what's at the setback line is a single story wing. And so that's what we want to incentivize.
Okay. What's better? Then you mentioned a few times that the revenue makes up, property taxes make up 83% of our income or revenue for the city. So what's the implication of that? I mean, are we being, are we going far enough? Or are we not? And I was kind of listening and I was remembering our conversation. I know that we had conflicting viewpoints, but I also know where we started and kind of why I was really you know, gung ho on this was really to stop the tear downs of some of these smaller houses. And I just don't know that we're doing enough. And that might be, yes, we're taking steps, but we're not taking huge steps. We're just kind of taking baby steps.
I think it's more that, right? I think when we analyzed the data. Again, 100 tear downs a year has been happening for decades, pretty much. And it's not like there hasn't been any changes since then. There's obviously changes in market conditions and desires. But those homes that are being torn down, the delta is so great between what's there and what is allowed, that it's very difficult to stop that without essentially a building moratorium. That's what that's what our conclusion is. And so if that's the case, then you say, well, what are you looking at? You're looking at making sure whatever happens is a quality product. And that's what we are hoping to get at here. And maybe in the future, there's other things that we could do as well.
But I think the thrust, and we've had to acknowledge that this is by indirection, maybe some influence some tear down opportunities. But it's designed to basically maintain the property value, but change the aspect of what it appears to be. And that's, it may not be where a number of members of the council would like to see us end up, but it's a step in that direction. And that's where I'm hopeful, just expressing my own view, that we could support this and get this on the books and then go to the next stage, whatever that next stage is. But I think the department's really worked hard, but I do want to hear from other people. I'm sorry. I think I had, now I'm a little out of order here in my own mind, whether it was Councilor Danberg or all
Well,
right.
I'm next.
Okay, right. Councilor Danberg.
Okay, thank you, and thank you for this presentation. This is a good reminder because we last looked at this before the summer. What percentage of the 100 homes that are torn down every year are small homes on large lots? Is it half of them? Is it more than half of them? Is that the prevailing circumstance?
So I think when we looked at this, it was a little while ago now, pretty much all, I mean, if definitely the majority are homes that are below the median size in terms of their square footage. And they are on lots that are well above the median size of a lot. So obviously, the buildable area is based on the lot size. There's more potential there.
I agree with the contention that we should do everything that we can to avoid ever having to have a moratorium on building. Because I think that is restraint of trade. It is we are stopping everything, taking an axe to a mosquito, so to speak. Would you go back to the slide that was almost at the end, and it showed two modern homes that were the black and white box type,
Sure.
flat roof with a garage protruding?
While
Yeah.
you're doing that, I just want to acknowledge we were joined by Councilor Maliki. Have I got all the members of the council now? Anybody missing? Okay.
Okay, you mentioned, and correct me if I'm wrong, that either one or both of those would today need, it could be done, but you would need a special permit to do it.
Correct, both of them.
Both of them. The reason for that is that the house itself, the two-story home, is more than 60% of the facade?
Correct. Well, actually, let me backtrack. Because of the exemption that any portion of a single story structure would be exempt. I'd have to double check for the one on the right, because I'm not sure about the garages here, because it's at 69%, so 69% above the maximum of 60. But it's possible that with these single, if this is a full single story portion of the building, that it might be below 60, so I do want to say that. This one, on the other hand, at 80%, 81%, even with, this minor piece here being a single story, would 100% require a special permit, because they're more than that proposed 60% maximum ratio of building width, facade width to the lot frontage.
Okay, and that more than 60, whatever it is, 81% includes the house, the two-story house plus the garage. If the house is let's say the house is 59%. Can that be built out to the setbacks? If the wing, let's say it's a full 3-car garage, which, I think unbalances that particular house. I don't like the look of it.
And I don't think you could do with the garage ordinance.
You cannot do that, because that garage is forward of the house also. Okay, all right, what I'm getting at is I would like that not to be able to be built in the future. Okay, thank you, that answers my question.
And I just would say that I'm not gonna make a judgment on design here. I think there are some elements. This house could be built potentially with some minor rejiggering of elements, right? If the garage is pushed back and moved here, and I think, again, we talked about that from a builder's perspective. They want to push the garage forward, they want to push things forward to maximize the backyard, to maximize opening floor plans. And so these are trade-offs that are going to occur, but again, it's the trade-off that will result in a better quality design for the overall fabric of a neighborhood versus the singular development. And I think, again, they can still get the square footage, they can still get the 3-car garage, they can still get all the elements that are here in this house.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much. I think we go to Councilor Albright.
Thank you. So can you just remind me how we came to the 60%? Is that the mean, the average? I mean, what is that number? What does that represent?
It's basically looking at lot frontages throughout the city in the different zoning districts. I think we did look a bit at what exists. I think that data, when you go through the accessory data, is pretty the data that we have be a little bit more skeptical of just what is true. So I think we looked at that, but really about the lot frontages, and said if you set it at 60% and you go through the different zoning districts and the typical frontages, you get a house that proportionally feels right. But also inevitably on most lots, what you end up with is greater side setbacks, because that 60% is more restrictive than the 7.5 feet setback requirements for most lots.
So if you just looked at the setbacks and you developed to the setbacks, is it more likely that you're at 80% or something like that?
I'd have to look.
Okay.
But obviously, if you did and built setback to setback, you'd typically be over that 60%.
Yeah, I just wanted to have a comparison in my mind to make sure that what we're doing is the right proportion. And so, I don't know, I guess
Well, you remember we went through a whole process.
Kind of sensitivity analysis.
And part of the challenge is that as a committee, we have gone through a whole learning process, and the field has been here. This is probably this 5th or 6th meeting we've had sort of cooking this idea along. But when the time comes for whatever decision we make, and if there's something that's the committee feels we should report to the full council, part of what I think the task of the chair and vice chair of the planning department is to recap some of the history in a way that our colleagues who are not part of the committee will have a sense of that we came to this conclusion by a rational process that.
So one way that would be good to maybe to explain it to everybody else is if you had a lot of, say, 100 square feet frontage. And they built to the setbacks in an SR1, it would be X%. I mean, I would love to know, but by comparison, we have 60%, it used to be 80%, I mean, if you built to the setback, so. It would be nice to have that comparison to see how much we're really fixing this problem.
Maybe for the public hearing, that would be a piece of the presentation that you could make at the beginning before the public hearing.
That would be helpful, I think, for others.
Yeah, that's a useful.
And if I recall, we have, or you have those slides.
Yes,
Right.
I believe. we
Yeah.
do.
I can kind of picture a couple of them in my head.
So one other question was the, going from 60 feet of frontage to 50 feet of frontage. Are there many houses, do you happen to know if how many houses we have in that category?
I don't have off the top of my head, but it is less, right? You chopped off a decent chunk. And again, I would take it partially with a grain of salt, just because I know when you look at the assessor's database and it says 60 feet or 50 feet, it might be, 59.8, and you need, it's only gonna come out when the survey is taken at the end of the day, but it's less, we can get that for the,
And in your work, you felt comfortable cutting from 60 to 50 feet? That we're still giving these 60-foot lots the right size house?
I think so, and again, this is a compromise proposal, so it was responsive to the committee's concerns, I think yes, in short,
Okay.
there's comfort.
Okay. I'm set.
Okay. Counselor Getz, then Counselor Ray.
I'm completely supportive of where you,
Come back up.
I'm completely supportive of where you've landed. Just because I sort of feel as if, it's now at the stage where we're sort of tethering back and remembering everything that we were presented. The 60%, what I like about it most is that in fact, it's actually building to comparable, what's existing. And if in fact a developer, a person who is interested in tearing down a house, and they're not permitted to then build up to the max, lot line. I think we'll be more incentivized to keep the house. And then to do, an adaptive reuse of the existing house, and we're seeing some of this on West Newton Hill, in terms of just, the plus minus of keeping the original house and changing it versus because it's, built the way where it's situated on the lot, versus tearing it down and maxing out on the front facade. I really kind of would love to know, because I know we keep hearing, and I would love to know the impact that's coming, from all of the recently instituted and, ordinances and the tearing down of new build. Just because I sort of feel as if it feels as if this is the right size and the right amount of change to be additive to all of those other changes. So I sort of feel like, let's keep going and let's see what this gives us.
Right.
But more importantly, you keep coming back to the table saying, we're tamped down right now, and we don't want to be doing that, but at the same time, I sort of feel as if when you spoke to, developers wanting to, speaking to wanting to change what we put in place, I'd love to hear what that's about, in terms of just what you're hearing.
Sure.
Just because I think we did a pretty good job of compromising in those situations, but it's probably too much for right now in terms of these times. Who knows?
Right.
And then lastly, I was not okay with this opening the door completely wide through the special permit. I just sort of felt, even in this context, I think there needs to be a standard, and I'm sort of feeling like, maybe incremental, 70%. That's the max. You don't get to go lot to lot line, unless you have extenuating circumstances on the lot, like you have an unbuildable part of the lot.
like you have ledge or you have something that then pushes the build to the front of the lot. That's sort of, how I read that, just out of like, okay, well, there are circumstances where you are coming in for a special permit and it's because of the lot conditions. So,
I should point out that what you described is available in the variance process
right,
now. I mean, in
Right.
other words, you don't have to special permit if you've got something that's unique to the lot. Where the application of the uniform rule poses a hardship that's of sufficient scale, you can go to the zoning board of appeals. You don't have to come to the city council. So there is that always available anytime. But I think the point I hear you making is that for the limited special permit opportunity, there might need to be an upset that you should consider. That would not just make it an exception that swallows the rule, but
right,
it is,
exactly.
it is truly designed to provide relief, but not a complete out.
Yeah.
Escape. Okay, Counselor Wright.
Thank you. To get back to your question about, this was like the low fruit to grab to do it, but there's other things. One of the things I'd really like to see what Lexington does is a sliding scale at FAR. So if you renovate your house, you make it bigger than if you tear it down type thing. And that's something probably next year or something like that, that we look at, and there's other things too. So this is just one of the low lying fruit that we could grab for this. You didn't show up on the screen, but I really, really like when you showed the updates to the zoning and you had the little notes on the side, and it was very concise and kind of the history of it and made it a lot easier to read or why we did something. And I hope you do that in the future, but it was great because it's been a while since we've seen this before. I agree with pretty much everything what Counselor Getz said, and I do like the 60 feet and having some type of upper limit. I'm interested that what you had is 40%. The data behind the number for single family homes tear down is down by 40%. But what's single family versus two families, that single family going to a single family going to a townhouses, I mean, how that data is looked at and to get an idea what's causing that. I think it's more external factors and also some of the changes we did, but the financing and things like that right now is kind of tough and
Yeah.
and unstable what's gonna be in the future too. I don't know if you could provide that data and take a look at it, you just send it out in a memo or something. That would be fine. That's about it for me right now. Thank you.
Counselor Oliver wants to speak, but he's offered the opportunity to Counselor Taylor, so I just want to just put in my 2 cents that I think this is a good proposal, and I tend to agree with the recommendation for an upset, or at least something in the special permit opportunity, but think about that. Counselor Taylor?
I'm glad my colleagues are satisfied with this. I'm not, I just don't feel like we're going far enough, but, it's good to hear that there are other ideas that we could do later. And are we, in making many of these changes, are we basically just forcing developers to build same square footage but different houses?
I don't think we're ever forcing the developers.
We're not
to-
forcing, that's not the right word,
But there's no change in the allowable square footage, so they can and probably would build the same amount of square footage. Just in a slightly different configuration.
I think some of the other changes do impact the square
Sure.
footage, such as the change in height measurement,
Mhm.
coupled with the retaining walls. So these all sort of end up being cumulative, but we are seeing some changes from those.
So yeah, I guess the actual square footage, and Councilor Ray has shown this in recent new development that is being built will have been reduced in many projects because of those changes around height, retaining walls, etc. Cause that's how they're sneaking.
Right.
They're getting that square footage. That doesn't really appear on paper
Right.
as countable square footage.
Okay,
And those are in place.
yeah. Thanks.
I think the point is that this is another step on our journey, not the end of the journey. Okay. Councilor Oliver.
Great, thank you, Chair. I'm gonna concur. I think that the presentation here is one of the better ones that we've seen in a while. And I really applaud how we're kind of moving forward with this. I do agree with Councilor Wright, Councilor Getz. There are other opportunities for us to explore. And I would argue they've been in front of us for quite some time, and I really intend to get to them at some point in the, well, future. I won't say in relatively near future, but in the future. Because I also concur with Councilor Kalis. We have a couple of steps yet to go, I think. And I also want to kind of remind all of us, because, and I heard it just a minute ago. Yes, we are making modifications. We're working on the overall height. We're working on, how it is you're able to build up the lot and kind of squeeze more square footage and right. And we're really trying to kind of not steer, but shape what it is that we're kind of, the signals we're putting into the marketplace, my words, as to what it is we're actually okay seeing or prefer to see in our residential neighborhoods when it comes to a rebuild. I'm going to also add to the record here that some of the statements that we're talking about here, no one's ever asked for a moratorium. I know that opinions vary in this group, including the planning department, as to what it is we were really after. And I'm not after a moratorium. I think we explicitly said on October 10th of 24, that's not what we're after. It's just not. We're trying to get these new homes off of the property lines. We're trying to make them make sense. We all know that as a community, we don't need massive luxury homes. We need a variability in housing, and we should be able to find ways to incentivize keeping the structures that we have. And I think, Zachary, you mentioned it really well, like our biggest problem, and we saw this, I think it was the first thing that UTL pointed out, little houses on really big lots are gonna be problematic. They're still problematic for us. But to that end, I also will concur with Councilor Baker, Chair Baker. We have something that is gonna, move the needle forward. I think we have something, a package that we've kind of arrived at that makes a lot of sense to take forward to public hearing again. I'm gonna wanna continue to really think about some of the de minimis and how we kind of, do we need to put some upper bounds on that? My words, and I think I've heard a few people talk about that already, but kudos. I think we're there. I think we need to get this back in front of the public.
Okay, so anyone else on the committee? Anyone not on the committee who wishes to be heard? Seeing none, I'm going to entertain a vote to hold the item, but set a public hearing for October 14th. And also to hold the two companion items. All right, all those in favor will say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, abstained, the ayes have it. Thank you very much. I want to concur with several colleagues. We handed you a Gordian knot and asked you to go back and try and slice it. And I don't know if it's sliced all the way through, but it's certainly badly severed. So from time to time, the department has felt that they were at the other end of some concerns, and I just want to say, when you have delivered something that seems to have gotten the consensus to the committee, you should be proud, and we are grateful. So I just think that ought to be said. All right, okay, thank you. We will now go on to the next item, which is, this is item 302. 24, aligning, Katie, did I get it all right on the votes?
Yep.
Okay, 302-24, aligning zoning to proposed use in new development. This is Councilors Oliver Wright, Lucas Maliki, Kayla Sparrow, Greenberg, Getz, and Labovitz requesting discussion and possible zoning ordinance changes to align zoning to the proposed use for by right or special permit projects for new build or major renovations. The goal would be to further improve consistency in lot utilization, e.g. setbacks and open space and structure, e.g. massing height FAR within a neighborhood. So this, who's gonna handle this one? Ms. Carr.
You just pull up the presentation. Okay, so this item is really looking at residential redevelopment in business zones. So I think there's two concerns. One is when you see fully residential redevelopment and whether it is sort of fitting in contextually with what's around it. And these are all done through special permit. However, they're relying on dimensional standards in the business zones that are not really tailored towards residential buildings. And I'll get into more of sort of the why in a bit. The other concern, and I think this is a smaller one, is in areas that are zone business, but really are not a business district at all. The concern of seeing maybe by right commercial redevelopment going there. I mean, that's not something we're expecting right now, but the zoning really does allow for or favor that by right commercial development, sometimes on a small residential street, which also seems out of context. So looking at, and this is what's existing, so this is looking at residential use in business zones. And you see the black sort of outlines are where these parcels are located throughout the city. And they are, a large portion of them are in Ward 1, as you can see the sort of density there. And this is existing use, so we are looking back at where it exists now, but then also thinking about as redevelopment happens, how we guide that development. So we think there's two sort of paths for addressing these concerns. And they can be done together, they can be done, sequentially. One is rezoning some individual parcels that are on predominantly residential streets from business to a more appropriate residential zone. This I think needs to be done carefully because it does eliminate the option for commercial or mixed use redevelopment in the future. So this is really, I think, we should really only look at this where it is truly a residential street in nature and you wouldn't ever want to see any commercial on those parcels. The other one, which I think is the, addressing more of the issue, is updating the dimensional controls for when you have fully residential redevelopment in a business zone. This retains the business zoning and allows for commercial or mixed use in the future, but helps set a better baseline for those special permit projects for 100% residential. So for the first sort of pathway, like I said, we really want to limit the parcels that are rezoned to truly where commercial is not desired and not appropriate on that street. For the second sort of path, we want to think about the dimensional standards in the business zone, such as setbacks, open space, lot coverage, things that are not tailored towards fully residential buildings right now. The business zone standards can be, when someone comes in to do a fully residential project in a business zone, which we are seeing in quite a few areas in the city, they need a special permit always to do residential on the ground floor. Usually they need special permits for various other things too. But the dimensional standards, the height, the setbacks, the bulk of the building don't change. Whether it's a sort of commercial box or a residential building. So I think that's where a lot of the concerns have come from, is that our zoning isn't really set up to better guide how that development might fit in. This is the current business district dimensional allowances. So you can see they get a little convoluted, complicated, when you look particularly at setbacks. So you're able to average the setbacks. You're able to take either the average or the lesser of half the building height for front setbacks. Some setbacks vary depending on whether you're abutting a residential district, not a use of like actual residential district, like an SR, MR district. Like the rear setback can be 0 feet if you're not abutting a residential or public use district. The side setback can be equal to an abutting side setback. When these aren't really getting us sort of consistent dimensional controls or setbacks. You know, the FAR and height are, you know, different than you would see in a like multi-resident zone where you're varying based on the pitch of the roof and how tall the building can be. These are more set for a commercial building. So to give an example, we focused on Adams Street to start, just because Adams Street is one of our larger business zoned streets in the city that has a mix of uses. It's not entirely business. So there's quite a bit of residential, recent development, as well as, you know, older homes that line Adams Street, along with commercial businesses or a mix of both. So what you're seeing is sort of such a mix of use as well as building typology along Adams Street. So I think one of the issues that we've seen is when new development comes in, they're basing their setbacks on what's around them, and they're usually surrounded by other business zones. So in some cases, you may have a 0 setback. They could be a small, older building next to them that's very close to the property line. They then get to match that abutting side setback, sort of further exacerbating problems, especially when it's a much bigger building than what was there previously. So we've sort of focused initially on looking at Adams Street and thinking about how we move forward with coming up with zoning that works for a street like Adams, that then maybe can be applied elsewhere as well. So the zoning really should incentivize and allow for the desired outcome, leading new construction to fit better within sort of that existing patchwork. Basing setbacks on adjacent setbacks really only works when that existing context is more consistent. And a lot of our business zones don't have that consistency, leading to sort of less desired outcomes. So there's a couple of ways we can go on this, and I think this is where we're looking for feedback from the committee in order to take this to the next step. One is updating the dimensional standards in all business zones based on the use. So having different standards for residential uses. I think there's probably also an argument for just cleaning up some of those setbacks across the board, even for commercial uses. Just, I think, tying them to what's around them isn't always the best practice. And if we did it this way, this would apply citywide to all business zones. Or do we think Adams Street, which was our initial focus, is unique enough that we explore an overlay district tailored just to Adams Street to address residential redevelopment along Adams Street or within the vicinity? So a few questions for the committee to consider. are we getting at the right issue? Have we defined the right issue? Does the committee agree that there are sort of two parts to this that we could pursue, rezoning in some areas, and we can start to dig more into what those, which streets and that may be, and exploring new dimensional standards for the business zones? Is this the correct criteria for rezoning? And do we want to focus just on Adam Street to start, or look at the business zones citywide? And that's what we have to.
So before we entertain discussion, let me just ask a clarifying question if I can, just in my role as chair. So the question I have is the issue has come up where people have been building residential inside the envelope of a commercial space. And has the problem of, you mentioned that the dominant number of eligible parcels were in Ward 1, if I recall, in the map you showed us earlier. But in terms of where it's actually on the ground, hit people, has it been Ward 1 or has it been citywide that we've seen these kind of impacts? I'm just trying to recall. Does anybody remember?
I can call out a couple in Ward 1 for sure. There's another that I think has people concerned, but in a different way on Beacon. Right by the aqueduct there, right? I'm gonna whiff on the address. But it's close up to the
All foods.
Whole Foods, thank you. But those are the ones that come to mind for me.
There's
There might
some
be others.
in Oak Hill Park, there's a MR district there, and so they built residential with the MR. Setbacks, or not the MR, but the EU
Yeah,
setbacks,
there's
some stuff.
Tiny pocket of business
Yeah.
there in Oakville, yeah.
River
Okay.
Street. The buildings that are going up there.
I guess just speaking as a way of separating the conversation, it seems to me that if the department, because the department doesn't, if you're talking about a citywide change in the rules, that's a massive modification. We don't know the full impact of that. But if you could take some sort of test areas like Adams and these other sites and say, if we were to try and respond to this, and if we changed the underlying zoning, it would produce this result. If we created overlay zones, obviously that can solve the site-specific problem. But it does seem to me that part of the challenge that you're asking us to give you guidance as to where's going to be the most efficient way for you to spend your time in a way that produces something that we can bring to the council that will make an impact in the most critical places. So that's, I'm just trying to frame it a bit. I don't have a position yet myself, but I wanted to say. Okay, so I did see Councilor Kalis first, then Councilor Wright, Councilor Albright, and then Councilor Getz. All right, and then Councilor Danberg.
So are you saying that when a developer comes in and if they're putting residential in a commercial zone, they're not asking for rezoning?
Correct.
They don't have to?
Cause it can do a special permit.
Yeah, the business zone allows for multifamily residential. By right uses are commercial on the ground floor and residential above. But you can ask for residential on the ground floor by special permit.
The Arizona.
I see.
Residential.
Okay.
No setbacks, no setbacks.
And was there, how much is there like a test area in Upper Falls potentially? I saw that was circled.
Yeah, there are some locations also in Upper Falls.
That's off the Chestnut.
Yeah.
I actually,
Yeah,
I do not think that we should be focused on Adam Street. I think that's the most opportunity, but I don't think that, I think we should test a smaller area first. I'm saying not Adam Street. I also feel like there's been a lot going there and I don't want to target anything over there. I think there's plenty of other areas that we could look at and gain and garner some learnings. So I prefer that.
Councilor Albright. I mean, I can Councilor Wright and then Councilor Albright.
I actually disagree. I think Adams Street would be a good test area because there's so many there. I see it as two parts and I like that and for Adams doing an overlay on that, I think that would work out pretty well. And pretty much any busier street that has commercial on it already could do like that overlay. But I also think the phase one where Clinton Street is the example, where a lot of that is BU and rezone that street to MR. I think we should do that. And that's where most yelling that we hear are those type of streets. Do you have any idea or a rough idea how many lots that is? You know, where that are more on the side streets that are in the residential neighborhoods that are like that?
So, yeah, not too many, if you're looking off of Adams, I think Clinton's the main one.
It's not many.
Yeah,
It's not.
and I think maybe, yeah, Clinton, maybe Lincoln. Mhm.
Councilor Arman?
I agree that cleaning up the business zone residential areas is the first step, and that should be the easiest step, and we should do that. With Adams Street, I'm not sure what Adams Street wants to be. I think Adams Street needs its own planning project where we say, what do we want to do on Adams Street? I don't think you can just rezone it without getting to the community together and talking about it. Because it's going off in so many different directions. But I bet there may be some areas close to business districts, which are mostly residential, which could be cleaned up pretty easily. So that would be my suggestion, to do a community planning project around Adams Street, see where it wants to go, where people want it to be.
Councilor Getz?
Well, that seems like the easiest way to go, you know, you came with that idea in the beginning, you know, just simply rezone, you know, specific parcels. But I really like the idea of, you know, if in fact you're gonna build residential on a BU lot, then you have residential standards. Stop, you know, so I just sort of think that, there's gonna be a combination of pathways here. And I actually am thinking about like, you know, because I think this is so egregious, you know, that I think people need to understand just how different, you know, with the use of the BU standards it is in terms of the new build. And then I think we have to be able to go out to the other communities, because there's all sorts of BU everywhere. You know, just in terms of looking throughout all the wards, so, and historically, I'm curious how this happened. You know, like I want to go back to the zoning maps and figure out how we evolved to this, you know, because there must have been a designation that flipped into this. That either there were shop homes or they were, you know, kind of tethered to an old housing format from way back when, you know, but it just sort of feels like the vestiges of old zoning here. That needs to be fixed.
Councilor Danvers?
I have a question, I think, on what problem that we're trying to solve here. The wording in the docket item, and I think maybe we'll start with Councilor Oliver, since you are the lead on this. The goal would be to further improve consistency in lot utilization and structure within a neighborhood. And so the question that I would have is, if the goal is to be consistent, are we saying that we want the commercial and the residential on one street to look more alike? Or are we in fact looking to create a different standard for the residential versus the commercial, and not, for instance, be able to build a residential home right out to the end of the lot line? my
Well,
question
yeah.
to, through the chair.
Yeah.
Yeah,
If I
all right,
could
well,
get a
this one you can
clarification on
find- he can answer directly.
Yeah, it's more the latter than the former. For example, this came out of Clinton Street, poster child for, yelling in Ward 1. And I think it's fair to say, and Jen, Zach, correct me if I go astray here, but when we did the kind of the walk around, right, of the neighborhood, what we did talk about was, on residential streets, Clinton, Lincoln, and there were a couple of others I think we pointed at. What I'm trying to accomplish here, or what we want to ensure is neighborhoods stay neighborhoods. And we want to avoid commercial, collectively call them dimensional controls being applied to residential buildings between two single-family homes, two multifamily homes, because if you recall Clinton Street, it sticks out. Whether you like it, you hate it, anything else, it's just, it doesn't really fit. And that was really the impetus of it. Not as much re-architecting or rethinking the zoning, for example, on Adams Street, but on the residential parts of the Clinton and the Lincolns, not even the corners that are at Adams and Lincoln or Clinton, but the residential portions of those streets.
To make sure that that if there's commercial creep or residential creep, that we differentiate the commercial standards versus the residential standards.
If I'm following your logic, yes. More or less, it's residential once you get off of Adams Street, keep it that way. You're getting on Adams Street at the corner at Lincoln and Adams, for example. We've got, I think those are those mixed? They're not MUs, those are business, right? Those are pretty much all business today. So it's really kind of, the original intent wasn't to go and rezone Adams Street, for example. It was to keep the residential portions of those streets residential, the side streets.
And
Okay, it's confusing me a little bit more, but I think when I hear more comment, I'll
So-
always try to clarify.
I don't know if I'm gonna add to the confusion or not, but it seems to me that if you have a parcel that is zone business and someone can build a business on it and it looks like a business and it goes all the way to the bloodline, that's what we expect of the business. If the business, however, has residential uses, or maybe it's all residential and happens to be business, it looks like a residence that's gone into a building box, a business box. And if that business box happens to be next door to regular residences, as opposed to other commercial properties, the impacts are what you've indicated at Clinton Street. So it seems to me that what we're hearing from the department is, can we identify in some rational way those situations where allowing the business setbacks and dimensional controls on a site with residential uses would be inappropriate? Right? And the question that the department is asking, can we help them identify what those sites are and what the criteria are for making the selection? Because you could do one of two options. You could rezone them to residential and then say the residential is automatically applied. Or you could say, we don't want to go quite that far. We want to preserve them as potential business uses. But if you add a residential component, you have to meet residential setbacks. That's not a rezoning, that's a specialized requirement that could be applicable in those contexts. So I think what the department, if I'm hearing you correctly, is asking for, give us some guidance. My personal preference would be more to the latter. I think of less global change, because that means you don't have to go through a whole citywide rezoning. But you're trying to say, for times when you do come forward with this kind of project, we want to make sure it fits in, and therefore we were going to ask you to follow a different set of setbacks in that specific context. Now, that's just where I'm coming out, but I don't know.
I think that if we were to be looking at, for instance, an overlay district, that's taking this docket item to a whole nother level. What Counselor, Chairman, Baker is saying is let's look at circumstances, and I would agree with that. Look at circumstances wherever they are in the city and see if we can make a rule for different types of circumstances. My question would be, in the case of a lot that is zoned commercial and it's got residential on either side. If you put a 3-story building on it, and have first floor commercial, does that allow for the commercial, dimensions? Even though you've got, let's say, 2 floors of residential above?
I'm gonna ask the question and I'm gonna come to Counselor Wright.
That was a question, does it, are you suggesting that we allow for commercial, dimensions on that? And even though it has, residential above it, in other words, mixed use, or do we have to then, does it have to be changed from commercial to mixed use? Do we need a zone change there in order to accomplish that?
So we haven't gotten that far yet. I mean, those are the questions we need to answer. as we
Okay,
move
so
forward.
I'll pose that question
Yes.
and
Yeah,
we'll-
no,
move to hold and we can
Yeah,
get that down the road a piece.
yeah, those are the considerations, and I think. What we're trying to get at tonight is, are we looking at? Updating the business, just going into the business zones and changing dimensional standards. For all residential or across the board? Or are we focusing, are we creating a new sort of zoning district? That is maybe better suited for mixing these. I've heard both. I think tonight is look at sort of an overlay, also look at just adjusting the rules for when you have residential development. So I think those are the paths we're
So let me go to recognize Counselor Wright.
So, I think. Getting back to Clinton Street, I don't think we want 3/4 of the way down Clinton Street to put in a restaurant. I don't think the neighbors would like to have a restaurant there. I think on these side streets, which are all residential. I think we should make it all residential. And it's the other streets like Adams. I think an overlay would be good, but the other thing is, it's not just the setbacks. When you have a BU, the FAR is like twice as much. So the volume of the house is twice as much than any of the other lots, so it's not just setbacks. That need to be looked at, but it's the FAR too.
Well, it's all the dimensional.
Yeah, all of
I
it,
include
yeah.
FAR as one.
Yeah. But I think the side streets that are all residential, I think those we take a look at and maybe do 1 or 2 of the lots in, keep it as a BU, but then the rest of them, change them. That's kind of what you're calling as a phase 1 into, maybe a MR2 or whatever.
Counselor Owen?
Yeah, would you mind pulling up the BU table, the controls table? Because I agree with what Counselor Wright was just saying, the Clinton Street project, middle of that block. And I think Counselor Baker said it well, it's a residential building built out inside a commercial sized box. And I think that's really where I'm coming from with this. And if you wouldn't mind getting rid of the participant panel for us, just so we can kind of see this a little bit bigger, that'd be great. Right, and like Counselor Wright just mentioned, what happened on Clinton is look at those FARs. They start at 1.0 and go to 2.5 or 3.0, granted that's a little crazy 8-story building, but I mean, those are massive in comparison to the rest of that entire street. And I think really what, in terms of direction, I really do like the idea of, very surgically perhaps changing, and I think we talked about this as well, so this might not be new news, but being very cautious as to which lots we rezone to residential on the side streets. The idea of creating an overlay, I think, is intriguing. That would be, you know, at least applicable to Adams and perhaps other parts of the city. That's really interesting. I do want to kind of also state that I certainly don't want to steer away from BU use of lots on streets like an Adams Street. Cause I do think it's, I actually, love the kind of the variety of what we're getting on Adams Street, even including some of the projects that are still underway, one of which is, you know, I'm really looking forward to seeing how that one comes out. But, and I do like the mixture of the new with the old as well. I think that's really, that's part and parcel of what makes Adams Street what it is. And I just, you know, the reason I wanted to kind of put this back up is you get a sense of what we're talking about here, because some of these structures today, they're being built on side streets in otherwise residential neighborhoods, and that's what I was trying to clarify, Councilor Danberg, when I was saying, you know, it's more of the side street residential use that was behind this, at least initially. So, that's my,
So
I think, hopefully consistent.
again, I'm not sure, however, what guidance we've given you, but that's gonna get you to the next stage, because it does, maybe you have to go back and sort of field test it, but if you, one way to respond to Councilor Oliver's concern is to say what you might call the intermediate lots inside a residential street have to be rezoned into a residential use. That's the simplest and easiest way. Then there are other situations where maybe on Adams Street, we would say we wouldn't rezone it, but because the context is such, we want to ask that you have a different set of setbacks and dimensional controls. So you may end up with two different models, depending on whether you're talking about a dominated residential street or a mixed use street. And so I'm not sure that's an easy call to make, because obviously, but my guess is that for purposes of moving this conversation forward, it might be useful to literally go into a chunk of Ward 1 and do both of those things and model them out. Because there are other parts of the city will be affected, but at least we could start with something that we would understand in a geographic area. And then, because I think these are ideas we're going to ultimately got to get through committee and then ultimately through the council. We've got to be able to explain them and understand what they mean ourselves before we can even ask anybody else to vote for them. So I guess I think what I would like to see is you take back this conversation and then model both and see if there's a sort of a bifurcated response. Councilor Albright.
I just worry about the, I'm not sure what you would do at Adams Street or any other street like Adams Street, where you've got a mix of things going on there. I mean, one thing it feels like you should be able to do is, as you were saying, if it's all zoned commercial and you're gonna do residential, then maybe should be a residential control until we figure out what it is we want to do on the street. Because I mean, creating an overlay district is fine, but what is it?
What's in there?
What the heck is it? So I really think it takes more effort to figure that one out. So.
Have we given you enough
Yeah.
chew on? I mean, without being indigestible?
I think so. We thought the rezoning piece was the easier lift anyway, so I think we can focus there first and come back with a proposal and go sort of lot by lot and where we think that should happen.
Okay, well, I think if we do that, we will advance the cause. Councilor Danberg.
Just a quick thought. Should we at least help you by coming to a general consensus on thinking that if there is a street that's, let's say it's all commercial, and someone builds a residential on that street that is commercial parameters, that we don't want that to happen. Is that, we've got an example of that. Is that something that we want to replicate, or is that something that we would rather not replicate? Maybe we could at least give you some direction on that.
Councilman Denver, do you mean to say that the street is all commercial and we don't want the,
And there is a lot that was, that all residential was built, ground floor, and let's say 2 floors up or 1 floor up. And we've got a 2.0 on that lot. Is that something that we want to replicate? I would say no. I don't know whether that's something that we want to decide.
I think that's,
That's the whole
I think,
point.
I think we agree completely.
Okay, so that's one of the points that we wanna make in this, that we haven't articulated, but.
but I thought you were gonna argue the alternative, which is a street that's all residential and somebody wants to put a commercial building in, use the commercial zoning in the middle of it to go use commercial size.
Oh, and I think I would propose that
Okay,
also. Yeah.
I just need to understand.
We'll go both ways.
So I'm gonna entertain a motion to hold and let the department cook on this one. That's agreeable. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, extension, thank you very much. Okay, so, manufacturing in New Nantucket, this is item. And I recognize Council Oliver, you may have to, disappear into the sunset for a minute, but we'll return. 258-24, discussion of possible amendments to zoning ordinances concerning manufacturing district in Manana. This is just to read the item fully into the record. Councilors Greenberg, Leary, and Oliver requesting a review, discussion, and possible changes to the manufacturing zone immediately adjacent to the Nananton Village Center area. The review and discussion should leverage the relevant findings from the California Street Manufacturing Zone Study conducted in 2023 and augment findings as needed. So who's on deck for this one? On the start, both, is this a team?
Team effort. Team effort. We don't have a presentation for this one. There's just a memo in the packet. So this item has been, I think, on the docket for a little while. And it's come out of a few different things. I think first was, we as a department got a grant to look at manufacturing zones, legacy manufacturing zones, particularly along California Street in Ward 1, and there was a report that came out and looking at what was going on there, how that came to be, and some possible recommendations to guide development in a way that maintained the economic development potential, and also recognize that these areas there's pressure for residential development. And secondly, and that's a report that exists. And then the second piece was around when the Village Center Overlay District work was going on, and that Nananton as a village center was originally included in the proposal. It was taken out, and as part of that discussion, there was talks of the areas immediately adjacent to the Nananton Village Center that are zone manufacturing for as an opportunity to think about redevelopment possibilities. And I think similar to what we were just talking about, there is a possibility of 2 phases of work. The memo creates scopes of work for the committee's consideration, and then the guidance given back to us on how to proceed. I think the first being more surgical zoning recommendations that would make the manufacturing districts work better. And what I mean by that is I think that'll kind of fall on to what is going to be coming up on the 29th about commercial development and how we can encourage economic development think that's more focused on village centers, but obviously manufacturing zones are a big part of that, albeit a smaller maybe land area. And within that, these kind of targeted zoning amendments, which would primarily fall on maybe allowing certain uses that don't currently exist or aren't currently allowed in the manufacturing zones to be allowed. So we know that there are certain areas of manufacturing that have buildings that have vacant office space or vacant space that they might be able to find tenants a lot easier if there were more permissible uses. Not allowing residential per se, but allowing various other commercial uses. That's just one example. And then there's a bunch of other things that came out of the California street study that we could potentially apply to the city's manufacturing districts overall. The second piece, and I think likewise is a longer term scope is really coming through with a planning study and saying, okay, hey, we have these industrially zoned areas. Some are industrial use, some are not, outside of Nonantuc. And we want to look at this holistically, and we want to come forward with a planning study to think about what could happen here, what should happen here. Those are essentially the options put, these two components. I don't think they're mutually exclusive, just like the previous one. You could kind of try and create more economic development opportunity in manufacturing zones while at the same time looking at a specific planning study. When it comes to those types of studies and it comes to those specific zoning recommendations, there were some precedent projects in the memo that can be looked at. And from there, I want to turn it back over to you all for a discussion and
confusing input.
confusing.
So, I want to just see, the docketers involved in this one have anything to say before we get into the general discussion?
Speaking on behalf of said docketers, I do think that as Mr. Lamel just pointed out, the starting point for the conversation was Nonantuc. And in particular, like the bulk of these lots, not only in terms of their quantity, but their overall size. Right now, they're just vast open parking lots of varying degrees of not being used. I think that if we can figure out the right way to approach that, perhaps separately from the longer term, I think that's a very smart way to look at this. That would not only satisfy what I'm gonna consider to be the spirit of the conversation that we all had during the VCOD. The passing of the MBTA and the VCOD together. I really do think that was the spirit of what we said. We were gonna take a long, hard look at what to do outside of Watertown Street. If I recall, east of Adams was the particular kind of discussion item that we had. I think that that's the right way to approach it. I think it's important that we look at what we would like to see as a city on those parking lots, because I think we can do better than surface level parking lots. Borderline never ending in some directions. But I digress. I think that that's important. And it is, believe it or not, important to Nonantuc that we not only get it right, anything that we collectively think needs to be done there, we have to get it right. And I think that what Zach has shown us is the right way to approach it, personally. 2 steps.
So if I'm getting correctly, the first step though would be to try and do a test drive in effect in the Nonantuc manufacturing, not go citywide yet. Because there are a bunch of districts around, but this is okay, I just need to understand what you're recommending. Now, Councilor Kane.
Yeah, I would think, this deserves a similar approach to like the Needham Street planning project, where you bring in counselors, residents, business owners, all the different types of people that have a stake and brainstorming and talking through things and, it takes some time, but I think that's, you really engage with the community and find out what you want there. And then set out those zoning parameters, as you did, and then. Right, you know, hopefully it gets developed in the right way, but I think that's how you do it.
Okay, now I've got several hands. I'm gonna go to Counselor Getz, Counselor Albright, and then Counselor Danforth, just in the order I have to see the hands go.
Yeah, I concur. I think that this is actually something that, we need to sort of, the planning study, the option two is the preferentially what I would be doing. You know, just out of, it's such an expansive area. And it has the potential for all sorts of stuff. And I, you know, just to speak to the precedent projects, all of them were great. You know, I mean, I thought, wow, this really opens up so much. You know, some were more supportive than others, you know, like that Alewife was like, you know, okay, these people, you know, got a lot going for them. But that's the kind of thing that'll happen and will come out of a, you know, a long-term sort of planning, process, you know, where it's gonna, you know, and I think of it as being the kind of thing where, I'm not seeing it today, I'm not seeing it, but it's years, you know, it's that kind of picture in my head.
And I just interject. When you're going to make sort of set up for the 29th, the conversation we're gonna have, I remember there's a limited part you were going to do, and then there sort of create the envelope for the discussion, but this may be a piece of that puzzle at that point. Now, yeah, Councilor Albright next.
So I would agree with the direction the conversation is going. Because, but the only thing I wanted to make sure of, and Councilor gets referred to it, is that people sometimes don't know what can happen when you bring them together to do a planning project. So you really have to not open their eyes in a way that makes them say, we're going this way, but open their eyes in a way that says, these are the 6 ways that people have done things like this. And we could do a 7th way, but it could be based on one of them or something like that. So I like that for that.
I too agree with the direction that the conversation has gone in. Started by Counselor Kalis, and picked up by everyone else. I also think, and I think that it's very important that we take enough time to, make sure we look into this. This is a very large, we're talking about Nonantum, it's a very large swath of property. I had the opportunity to kind of take a cook's tour through there. And it's, a lot of it is parking and a lot of it is a lot of stuff that you never dream is
Kind of
in there.
surprising that it's there.
Yeah, and but it's there and it's been there for a long time and it's probably not earning the community and the landowners. It's not at its highest and best use, in other words. But who would ever have thought that the CV area that Kendall Square used to be would wind up in biotech. Biotech wasn't a thing even 40 years ago. What's coming next? What things are out there that we haven't even thought of? We've got a big manufacturing district here. We want to make sure that we don't, let's say, zone it all in one direction because that's the hot thing now, you know, just all residential. When 30 years down the road, we would wish that we had some of that, the ability to do some other things there. So, since we don't know today what are the possibilities in the future, 50 years from now, I think we need to really look at the many possibilities, and be as flexible as we can, in that area. And listen to, the Nonantum community that knows this as well as anybody, because it's in their backyard. I've heard some, very good ideas for, what could happen back there, but I think that flexibility is gonna be key.
So, at least I'm hearing some sense of the committee that it's worth concentrating some of the inquiry into the Nenana area. And then seeing what emerges from a community conversation. Now, that's not gonna happen immediately, obviously. But is that a fair summary of where you think you are?
Sounds right to me, and I think like similar to the previous item, the majority of the area is in Ward 1.
Yeah, well, but and there may be things that emerge in other parts of the city that as a part of this, but I think my concern is that if we ask you to do too much, you can't do anything, and I'd rather have you take something that seems to have some limits around it of some dimension that can enable you to give a response.
Just a quick question, if I
Sure.
may. One of the things that I think we've talked about, kind of loosely associated with this project. But the more generally, the idea of, you know, and building off of what Councilor Danberg was just talking about. Uses, right, that might come I'm gonna go to the use tables that we've been working on in BU. To me, that still makes a ton of sense to look at for manufacturing, right? Not only in conjunction with the project that we've also discussed. But in general, the use of these properties, I think, is core to everything we need to be talking about. And is that kind of how they might be conveyed as use tables? Or just one way, I guess, I don't know.
I think that's very much one way. I mean, I think. To what everyone was saying, I think. Baking in some flexibility. Right? I think if you can get the form right. For what, you know, for what the community, what the neighborhood would make sense. Then I think you can be more lenient. And I think in the uses potentially and what can go in. Because we just don't know how things will evolve.
You've got office buildings being reconfigured as housing now is a national trend, and then who would have thought? I've seen it come the other way, to center in housing that went into offices, sure, in the buildings around Union Street,
Sure.
20 years ago. Okay, have you got enough, you think, to work on? All right, I'd entertain a motion to hold on this from the vice chair, since this is his item.
Motion to hold.
All right, all those in favor will say aye. Opposed, abstention, the ayes have it. Thank you very much. We have two other items before us. We have two reappointments. The information is in the attachments to the agenda, but let me read them into the record. 33725, reappointment of Martin, and I'm not going to pronounce this correctly, so apologies in advance. Smargiassi, and to the Community Preservation Committee. And the second is 23525, reappointment of Elizabeth Sweet to the Zoning Board of Appeals. Both appointments expire in 2028, although in different days. So, any comments, discussion? Councilor Gass.
Well, is Mr. How would you pronounce it? Yeah, is he here?
And it's a reappointment.
No, but it's not really.
It's a reappointment.
Reappointment.
Well, because it seems as if in his little piece, he was saying that he actually, was on the Auburndale Historic District Commission. And then he was an associate, slipped, I was already a member of the CPC, my associate membership slipped. I'd like to reapply for an associate member of the Auburndale Historic District Commission.
Well, that's
So-
not what the docket item is.
I know, that's
Yeah.
what.
I think he also wants to
Oh,
do that, but this is for the reappointment for the CPC.
Okay, but
letters.
he expressed an interest to
I
be.
think there may be a separate,
Maybe
Item.
two things.
yeah.
We have people who have
Yeah.
historic backgrounds who come to the CDC independent.
So
Yeah.
what he was
he's,
applying for.
for this one, it's for CPC. He's also interested in going back on the Auburn Historic District Commission, I believe, but this
Okay.
docket item is just
Okay,
reappointment for CPC.
okay, all right, now it's confusing for me.
Any other comments?
Mr. Chair, I'm happy to move approval on both.
We have a word for,
Oh, excuse me, we have a word for it. Yes, my apologies. We have two. Counselor Christmas.
I am happy to move approval on both, and in case there was a question, it's pronounced sweet. That's the way that name is.
Thank you for that. All right, there's a motion made, and all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, abstention? The ayes have it, thank you very much. Okay, folks, I think that concludes our business. What I will do is ask, the clerk to send you out, just a memo of the likely docket items that are coming up in the next rounds of meetings, so you'll have some idea of what's happening going forward, rather than just wait for the package, because we've got these strange special meetings in different times that we normally need.
Yeah.
Is that agreeable?
That'd be helpful.
Yeah, so, we can do that. All right. All right, then I, motion adjourned. We're done?
Motion to adjourn.
All right, you're all in favor, say aye, you go. Okay.